Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another animation reaction and breakdown. So after we're done with the reaction, I'm going to be sitting here talking and breaking down some of my favorite shots and the techniques used in them from the perspective of myself, an animator. So without further ado, why not, just get into it, shall we? Let's go! Oh! I didn't expect the the aspect ratio. Just a little bit of scat. That wasn't accurate. That's fine. I'm gonna say it, so far I'm getting Neo energy, like from Ruby. Don't hate me for that. She's kinda got the attitude. Ooh. There's some fun little stuff in this, huh? Ooh. Oh, gorgeous. Ooh, there's some really fun stuff in here. Of course, I'm keeping my thoughts for after the video, but... Alright. Oh! Nothing stops that swing. All right. Well, I mean, from here, there's nothing else to do but do the breakdown, shall we? Let's go. So this is a new microphone setup for me. This is usually my streaming microphone when I'm behind the drums, but I figured it would be really nice to be able to look down, look over here, and not lose any of that detail from the microphone being a distance away from me and just losing that general volume. So now it should stay pretty consistent. So I'm going to start with this. This is not a big thing at all. It's just me kind of being nitpicky on purpose, but this is something that is not very commonly done well in animation, and because I'm a drummer, I have to point it out, as well as most musicians always see that their instruments are not played correctly, and this little passage he does here, that's not accurate at all. That's not even close to accurate. I'm sure the same is for the saxophone, the piano, etc., but like, that's not what he played there. He got the crash right, I'll give him that much, but that's not the right drum. So I wanted to talk about this one shot here because this one shot is not all that great. It could be better, but you can see here it's falling to some of the problems that a lot of animators deal with when they're doing a shot that's locked off like this. Something with more camera movement usually hides problems like this, but because the sequence is locked off with the lighting the way that it is, there's some problems going on here. Something that I've noticed in general is that the color of their bodies is not the same as the lights around them. Like, all of this and everything is a lot softer. The characters are a lot more harsh. They're in a whiter, cooler color temperature, and it's a little bit jarring because you know that that world isn't showing that color temperature, so it's a little bit strange to see it. They do what they call baking. I've talked about it before, but they basically have their own color profile and their own lighting that is baked into the character model or just affects the character, that really it makes them stand out, but it makes them also stand out of the world because there's that loss of unity in the color palette of the shot. So while you can see the colors of the characters very clearly, and you can tell that the characters themselves are important and they do stand out, but it ruins that sense of unity, especially when you're looking at characters like this that are so striking on the sequence. So there's this other thing in this shot that I had already alluded to, where there's something that is affected by the fact that it's a locked off shot, and it's the feet. You can see these feet here, if I can tab right through, they aren't exactly locking onto the world now, are they? They slide around quite a bit. Not too bad, I'll give them that. It's not bad at all. It's within parameters. I will give it to them. They did the best they could. It's very hard to make a character and background that are completely separate assets without any sort of camera movement to hide it look like there's no camera movement. To lock in the foot purely onto the floor is very difficult, especially under time crunches and within parameters of the shot's composition. It's just a pain. So you can see stuff like right here. You can see right, just pay attention right there. It also happens on this foot in a few frames, but you can see this character's foot kind of dip in a little bit, and then this one over here kind of, you can see the character kind of slide the heel there, and it's not, again, it's not too bad, and I've definitely seen way worse, but it's just one of those things that I notice when I'm watching, and I'm just like, and I really do like things like this, where the character puts in a little bit of personality to the movement here, and the animators play with the character's personality. I would have liked to see this character kind of go back to this tray with a little bit more energy. I would have liked to see the continuation of this movement instead of it cutting straight off to this shot, because I feel like that little bit of extra, like she's like, oh, I'm turning around, and then that cut to this is very jarring, and personally I would have let it hang a bit more, but I'm sure the director had a reason for it, be it just simple time saving. I would have liked to see her do something like turning around like this and then kind of doing a little hoo-hoo, like a prance back to it, like a little tiptoe thing. And just because we're here, this is the type of camera movement I was saying helps hide those weird inconsistencies with foot placement, because when the camera's moving like this, you might be able to see her feet land, but you really don't feel or see it scooting around the floor quite as much. If you're trying to do a shot and you're wondering why things aren't exactly landing right, or things feel like they're sliding around a bit, throw in a little bit of camera movement. It usually helps hide most of those issues. And just to point out a fun little Easter egg thing here, you might have noticed right here, of course, the sketch of the character, but I don't know if you ever looked close enough to see this little skull times 10 right next to it. You might have seen the skull, you might have seen the times 10, whichever one, but that actually has a point. She takes out 10 people in the hallways in this sequence. I just thought that was super cool. So like the time where she goes up the stairs and gets the wine to the point where she breaks through that wall, she's taken out about 10 people. I counted through and went back to this just to make sure, but there were 10 people she took out. That's a really fun little Easter egg. I really like that. That's fun. So of course this sequence is really cool. What they're doing here in this entire shot is what's called a Dutch angle or a Dutch shot. Dutch angles are usually used for something that is a little off, a little wrong, or in this case, trying to even be menacing. Like, we know that there's somebody down there who's a killer. So it's that sort of thing, you know? Really cool to have these types of shots used, and especially in such an artistic way like this. And of course, this moment here with the knife coming out the screen, and you see that flash, that's just looks to be a 2D asset that they put on top of it. But I like this pulled focus as the knife gets closer as well. It's really cool to see that, especially done so accurately. They waited the proper amount of time it would take for the knife to get there to here. And there's also a hidden cut right here where you would normally just be watching it and it would feel like all one big swing, like the camera's turning around. But instead, if you go frame by frame, you can see the cut there. It's not hidden or anything, but in motion, you really don't feel it. Now, this sequence is really fun for one particular reason, and it might not be what you think it is. But let's see if you can spot it. You can see if you can see what I saw. You're probably thinking, oh, the aspect ratio changed. It went from that small box to a widescreen. No, you're wrong. I mean, it did, but also that's not what I'm talking about. As this wall falls apart, you can still see this line here. There is a line right there. You can see it on both sides, because like this one has it too. It's just hidden more because of the edge. But like you can see this line where this, and especially like right here in this, you can see it better. There is a line right here of where that box used to be, where the 4:3 ratio gets broken off and is spread out. They basically put a filter over this one shot and then blasted a bunch of stuff on it. It was like, nobody will notice. I did. I noticed. And now you all noticed too, and you'll never be able to unsee it. How does that feel? Of course, I had to talk about this absolute beauty of a simulation. So this is obviously just a simulated shot. There's no way they're hand animating each piece of this, but I'm pretty sure it's just a simulation where they would take it, set it, bash it against basically an invisible block, and let it do its shatter pass, and then they threw that into the final composition. I just love the sheer amount of detail in these shots. The lighting, the colorizing, everything about it is gorgeous. This is that type of lighting that I was talking about earlier, where because this shares that like more warm tone, it feels like it's in the sequence more than the characters did. So I know there's an entire section there that I just skipped over that had a bunch of cool action animation and good fight choreography, but I don't really have much to say about it because a lot of it is just generally standard. A lot of the shots they used were pretty standard, and I didn't really have much to say about them, so I apologize if anyone was hoping, but I didn't really have anything I could add to those. This is something small, but again, obviously this giant line here going right up the center, you trace that with your eyes, even if you're not thinking about it, you're going up that line and you're like, where is this leading to? But then the camera follows it. That's just good camera work right there. That's a form of leading the eyes of the audience and preparing the brain for something that is coming soon. There's a lot of ways people do this. One of the most common is just matching the location on the screen with a different cut. So for example, if the character is dead center, then the camera cuts to something else, the focus of that next shot would be dead center. It's a good way to lead the expectant viewer along for the ride instead of randomly throwing them to another part of the screen that their brain wasn't anticipating to have to look at, so you don't miss any details. It's a very easy way to do that and very effective, as you see this line going straight up and then the camera follows it. So you get to see where this camera's intent is going to be, and it's just a good way to lead the eye. And then of course right after this we have a pretty solid impact frame. I've had multiple mentions of impact frames between my animation videos because I love pointing them out. This is a small one, but I like that it then illuminates. Like, it's completely dark in here, then that just bright arc there illuminates where the blade is going, and then it just goes into this beautiful 2D animated effects animation that's just, it fits so well. It feels like it shouldn't fit because the whole 2D versus 3D thing is definitely a factor. Sometimes 2D just looks better in motion, especially shots like this. And obviously this sequence is going a little too fast for me to do anything but go frame by frame so you can see what I'm talking about. But all these little swipes she's doing in order to make this sword move work are basically just, they seem to be 3D assets, but within the 3D space, they're rotated and scaled differently and crossing over in the case of like this one right here, where you can really tell that that's overlapping pretty hard. But it doesn't really matter because it's going so fast, you know? It's just a way to make the screen fill up with energy, and these sorts of light trail things are very common for that. Usually light waves are saved for more like synthwavy things or like techno-punk sort of stuff, so this sort of thing works in this context, since this world seems to be a mix of cultural influences from a bunch of different time periods and a bunch of different places. And of course, this follow-through shot is just gorgeous. There's not really much to talk about in the way of everything else, because I've kind of mentioned the aspects it's built of, and all these things kind of moving in 3D space, working together to be able to sell this shot. And I actually believe as we get closer to this guy's face, this right here is a different shot from this one. It's not a follow-through. This is the first frame in this sequence. So, like, it's going into this shot, the camera would stop right here, and that's the end of that shot. And then they start this next sequence with basically just a PNG, or maybe just the model of the eyeball right up next to the camera, and then just flying the camera right through it because you wouldn't really notice at that high of a frame rate. It's one of those things that people do in animation, especially 3D animation, to save some asset time and render time, but it still sells the shot. There's nothing wrong with doing that as long as it works, right? In motion, if it works, it's not stupid. I really like this shot too because it follows a lot of rules of general photography. So you may have noticed this before. I'm going to leave this up on the screen so you can see it for a second. But you may have seen a box similar to this on your camera, on your phone, whatever it has to be when you're taking a picture, where these sorts of lines actually do mean something if you're not a photographer. Now you can see on this line how exactly, and again, this is not a perfect diagram here and is way off scale, but this is what I mean. Right here, this spot and this spot down here are being crossed by the subjects. This is something that they use a lot in photography for framing that shows the characters and who is more important in the frame and just general subject following. There's a bunch of rules to it, but there's a lot of ways to use this sort of graph, and I'm actually very impressed that they did this in order to pull the focus properly on the character in the background as well as the character in the foreground. Something simple, something everybody who does directing should know, but it's just a really nice thing to see this type of attention spent instead of just throwing them wherever they want on the screen just because it looks cool. When you can make something look cool, but also aesthetically feel really neat, that is good, you know? Of course, when I say neat, I mean like everything's perfectly placed. Yeah, it looks cool, of course, but I already said that. It's a separate category. There's cool, then there's neat, as in like tidy, clean, you know? I also really like this shot here where she's getting the knife put up against her chin. She flicks it up and kind of moves her jaw out of the way. That's a very natural thing to do. So this is the type of thing I like to talk about. These little character choices in the animation, especially in the faces and expressions, that really sell a certain emotion or a response to an action. Also, in addition to what I just said, this little agitated nibble she does on it before snapping it off and going for the attack. And she also moves her head out of the way, like she moves it out and back away from the knife. It's little things like that. That's so cool. I like it when people put in that much effort to the character animation and give it that extra thought. So yeah, that's pretty much it on that one. I think I've said all I can say about that one. So if you liked what you saw, if you liked my breakdowns of that, expect another one very soon. If you want to support me, by all means do so. You should know how to do that. And I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!